Jeffrey Epstein. It's me, Alan Dershowitz.
Oh, yeah. Hi, how's it going?
Yeah, just up here on vacation.
Oh, that's great. That's great. You know, Alan, I got to run, but it's good to see you.
Well, I live right around here, so, maybe if you're around, we can get dinner sometime soon.
Alan, I'll be honest with you. I'm not sure. You know how people are around here. They talk.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I understand.
I'm sorry, Alan. We had a lot of good times together, and we all make our choices. Listen, I gotta go. I'm with some friends. Oh, hi, Alan. Don't talk to him. It's really good to see you, Alan. It really is. And good luck.
You too, Jeffrey. You too.
Well, you get the idea. I should have kept the seaplane in here. There we go.
There it is.
There it is.
Flying off to Valhalla.
We're not doing that again.
Oh, man.
This needs to come down a little bit. Wow. Sound design.
You would have to take a seaplane
It's tough.
to go molest children, right?
Yeah. That's the ideal way to do it.
Right.
You get the salt air. It's invigorating.
Yeah.
Leaves right from Martha's Vineyard.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
It's like the man with the golden gun with like the private islands.
Yeah, exactly.
Oof.
Well, Fleming had one of those.
Oh.
Fleming had an island, or he had a compound
Oh. Okay.
on an island, which is close enough.
Yeah.
And he was British, so strikes 1 through 3, he is definitely a pedo. I'm saying it right now. He's dead, so he can't sue me.
Yeah.
You cannot libel the dead. I'm just going to say it right now. Ian Fleming, Chomo.
Who was Ian Fleming?
He wrote.
He
He was
did Bond.
a spy, and then he wrote the James Bond novels.
Oh, that's a shame.
Yeah.
Yeah, what are you going to do?
Yeah,
it's too
I read
bad.
all those novels.
Yeah, it's too bad.
He didn't see the name.
Yeah.
I just imagine this song playing, and Alan Dershowitz is like, he's got no one to rub sunscreen on his back. He's just at a tennis court by himself, hurling the ball over the...
Poor guy.
Yeah.
I hope he has strength in these trying times.
Yeah. He's on a tandem bike right now, but it won't go.
And wobbling. The back is unbalanced.
He's on a jet ski by himself, and none of his pedophile friends will talk to him anymore.
He's in a diner. He's drinking out of a giant milkshake, and there's one empty straw pointing away from him.
Anyway, that's the voice you hear is Matt Christman, who's our
Hey,
special
folks.
guest today. Thanks for being here from Chapo Trap House. And we got a very special episode today for you folks, because today we're talking about assassinations and who does them and why they're done. And we talk about the men who get assassinated and the men
women who love them.
It's like a children's book.
Right. Well,
The big book of assassinations.
yeah, this is like the children's book version of an educational show.
Yeah.
T is for triangulation of fire.
Yeah. But Matt's here to talk about a couple people. So as we all know, in the 1960s, the CIA recruited Sam Giancana and Joseph Roselli to assassinate Fidel Castro.
Yep.
And what's kind of funny about that, I mean, because I read an article today, what's sort of funny about it is like, yeah, you do think of assassinations as being done in this like smoky room, by like people who are smart. But
Right.
a lot of times it's just guys who are like, we'll make the cigar explode.
Yeah, the CIA had a long, fruitful history of just absolutely idiotic ideas to assassinate Castro, including putting explosive seashells on the beach that he would walk on, shooting him with poison blow darts,
Right.
Explosion.
putting a real thing that was in JFK but is real, putting a depilatory cream in his beard so that it would fall out, because then he wouldn't have his machismo anymore, like
then he would just-
Samson's hair.
And then he would just kill himself.
Yes, and also the idea
Agent Orange
of smearing. The most out there is one of them is smearing the mouthpiece of his scuba apparatus with LSD so that he would freak out and trip while
Turn gay.
scuba diving and then drowned.
Come up too fast and get nitrogen bubbles.
Yeah, he get the bends. And speaking of Ian Fleming, he consulted on this shit. Yes, Ian Fleming was consulted by the CIA when they were spitballing how to kill Castro and how to overthrow communists in Cuba after they took over. And his idea involved LSD as well. And it was the mass dosing of their water supply coupled with an attempt by using radio and pamphlets to make everyone in Cuba think that the second coming had happened. He was going to dose. He wanted to dose the population of Cuba with LSD without their knowledge, and then get them through radio broadcasts and propaganda announcements to believe that Jesus had returned.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
We're gonna steal all the toast in Cuba and put Jesus' face on it.
But I mean, he hadn't been a spy for many years, and I have a feeling that after he proposed that, when they were like, "Okay, Ian, thanks a lot."
Yeah.
I guess he's lost his fastball.
Guy's losing his edge.
He's gone. Yeah. But one of the hundreds and hundreds of them, one of them was a plan to hook up with Giancana and Roselli and those guys and get the mob to do it. Hey, they know how to kill people.
Right.
We'll just shoot him while he's eating spaghetti.
But unfortunately, Castro never ate spaghetti.
Yeah, that's the problem. None of the restaurant. The problem is none of the restaurants in Havana had the tank, the old timey tank for the toilet to tape the gun behind, so they could never set it up.
Like, we're out of ideas. Well, anyway, let's talk about who Giancana and Roselli were. They were two gangsters from Chicago, and they worked in Al Capone's outfit, and then they moved up pretty quickly. And then Giancana ended up being sort of like the boss of the Chicago outfit, and then Roselli was pretty high up there as well.
Yeah.
Matt has a story, but I think it's funny because there's an interesting story about Giancana and how he acquired his wealth, or a big part of his wealth.
Oh yeah.
And Matt has a story about that, and I think this is interesting because we do like to think of like really what we're finding doing the show is none of these guys adhere to any of the traditional mafia values that they talk about, which is like respect and honor and loyalty. I mean, like the way that Giancana acquired a big part of his wealth.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is what stuck out about him the most to me was like, he's from Chicago. He started off as like a wheelman, just like smash and grab low level stuff. Mm-hmm. But his like main thing that caught the eye of the outfit was taking over the black numbers game, the policy games.
Oh, right.
So like how he did that though was like, I mean, like he was the first to find out about it and be like, we could run this. So he learned about the game when he was in prison from Eddie Jones. So he ran the policy game. And then they decided to kidnap Eddie Jones, and they held him hostage for a week.
But the funny thing about Eddie Jones was like Eddie Jones was a pretty big gangster in Chicago, and like Giancana befriended him. Mm-hmm. They like became business partners. They started like a nightclub together or something.
Yeah.
He was like, "Yeah, it's me and you, Eddie.
Yeah,
we're gonna be."
These prison ties don't run very deep.
Yeah, and he also did kind of like resent him because he was black,
right,
and successful, which Italians do that sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're haters. They're born haters.
If he didn't take advantage of this guy, somebody else was.
Yeah.
You know, that's kind of the mentality I got from him. But this guy who took over for Eddie Jones, they run him out of town, right? They convince him to retire to Mexico.
They ran Eddie Jones out of town. Yeah. Because they kidnapped him. They were like, "You're done."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then, they encouraged him to retire to Mexico. So it sounds like he got away. But the guy that replaced him eventually dies a very brutal death, but he was considered a Robin Hood who said, no, fuck that. And he created this struggle for the policy game for 6 years. But Sam Giancana eventually got it. But it's such an interesting story with this guy because he was like Robin Hood.
Yeah.
It's like nobody wanted to turn on him. So like they had to do this systematic crackdown on the policy game, like where they would shoot all these people who were just gambling, and it got real bloody real fast. But so what happened here was they tried to kidnap him on June 19th, 1951, and Teddy kills one of the kidnappers, Fat Lenny Calfano, who was not only a made man but the capo of Joseph Cafano, or Marshal Joseph Cafano. So the police department tries to charge him with murder, and they take him in, and they have to have him under heavy guard. People are testing his food, like they're coming after this guy with everything they got. But they were able to beat the case. Self-defense was the verdict, and he got out, and he's quoted saying, "They'll have to kill me to take me." Sounds like a Denzel movie, right?
Yeah.
But they eventually get him. He was told he had stomach cancer, 6 years later. So it's August 1st, 1952. So he dismisses his bodyguards who they haven't been able to get him yet. And then he just stops hiding, and he wears the story goes, he wore a 3-piece suit, strolled down South Michigan Ave, and around 10 p.m. he was unlocking his car, and a voice yelled, "Row!" He turned. He was cut down by several shotgun blasts. And he died. He was shot 8 times in the head at close range.
Yikes.
Got to make sure the job's done.
Didn't you say they were like, what balls on this guy? It's a shame we had to.
So like after it's all said and done, Giancana was overheard on an FBI wiretap in the 1970s. Giancana said of Roe, "I'll say this N-word or no N-word. That bastard went out like a man. He had balls. It's a fucking shame we had to kill him."
Nice.
Well, I'm sure his family is happy to know that these fucking grease balls, he gave him respect even though he was black.
Right. He shows up at the funeral.
Yeah.
Like, "Hey, if it means anything."
That's very big of you, Sam Giancana, literal murderer and criminal.
Oh, wow. Thank you, sir. Yeah. So the plot to kill Castro, I mean, that was like Eisenhower's idea in the late 1950s.
Nixon was the first guy to sort of he was charged with he was the White House liaison to the first covert efforts to try to overthrow Castro. Was Nixon under Eisenhower? Yeah.
Okay. What was Nixon's position?
He was vice president, and that was one of his. He didn't get a lot to do under Eisenhower, but one of the things he did in his last year or so was to oversee the CIA's burgeoning plans on how to overthrow Castro.
Nixon was like, "Hey, we got to poison the water and get these Polacks out of here." And they're like, "Why don't you just try to kill Castro?" That was like his little busy work. Maybe.
Yeah. He'll never be able to do it.
Yeah. So I guess so what happened at that time? So the Soviet Union was using Cuba as like their sort of satellite.
Well, it was a process. When Castro took power, he didn't even call himself a communist.
Okay.
There were a lot of communists in the movement that had overthrown Batista, including Che Guevara, who was pretty committed at that point. But it was sort of a multi-tendency thing. It was civil society people, even some liberals. Ted Cruz's dad, for example, and
he killed Kennedy.
And yes, and so
Cruz is the Zodiac killer,
and his dad killed Kennedy. It's pretty impressive.
Wow,
it's a lineage. And he was sort of on the fence, and they got in power. They executed a lot of the Batista sort of apparatchiks and their secret police guys. A lot of people left. All the people who now are in Florida and are reactionary right wingers and who complain about how their slave plantation got taken by Castro.
Right. Right.
But at first he was not really committed to becoming part of the Soviet bloc. I mean, there was a whole non-aligned movement of third world nations that didn't want to be considered part of either sphere of influence, like spearhead of Indonesia, India, that kind of thing, Yugoslavia even. And until it really was Bay of Pigs. It really was the realization that the U.S. was not going to stop trying to overthrow him.
Okay.
That made him finally be like, all right, fine. There's only one real force that we can ally with that can kind of counteract the power 90 miles away from us that could crush us at any moment. And that's when they started more closer connections with the Soviet Union. And that's shortly after. And then after Bay of Pigs is when the missiles came in. And it was all an effort to sort of protect against America, because that really showed that they were really committed.
Right.
But before that, he did go to the UN right after he took power in New York, and he kind of owned everyone in the U.S.
Castro?
Yeah, he owned us pretty hard.
Mic drop type of deal?
Yeah, and it really did. Even if he hadn't committed to being a communist by that point, it definitely let everyone know, yeah, this guy's a fucking asshole. We got to do something about him. He went to New York to talk to the UN, and he went to a Midtown hotel, and when he discovered that it was segregated, that it didn't allow black people, he left and went to Harlem. And he went to a black-owned hotel in Harlem, and he just hung out with all of the black people in Harlem. And there's all these pictures of him talking to waiters and busboy, him and Guevara in their fucking fatigues, like behind, in a kitchen with a bunch of busboys. And that was like, it humiliated America because it pointed out, yeah, you're a racist country with a racial caste system and all that, and that got him pretty pissed.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Do you think Castro knew what he was getting into when he took over Cuba, that he would have this enemy to contend with?
I don't think so. I think it's a kind of a tragic tale how frequently people who end up becoming America's number one enemy go into their struggle with the thought that America would either be an ally or maybe even at least neutral and maybe even an ally. Mm-hmm. Famously, Ho Chi Minh. He wrote to the U.S. After World War II, tried to get an audience with FDR and said, I respect America very much. I think that George Washington was great. The Declaration of Independence is one of the great founding documents for human rights, and that's what I want to follow. And, would you help us get the French out of here? And instead, the U.S. footed the bill for 80% of the war in Indochina until the moment they took it over when the French left.
Right.
And yeah, because there's the rhetoric that America puts out there, and a lot of people without any other experience of America sort of assume it must be true, and then they actually get in a position to threaten sort of America's prerogative internationally, and then all of a sudden they find out, yeah, that means nothing. We do not give a shit about any of that stuff.
Yeah. And I guess you don't really understand these conflicts until you understand like big money, because you think
absolutely
like why do we want to go across the world and take,
yeah,
like Guatemala is in the 50s. Guatemala, which was sort of what the CIA wanted to do in Cuba but failed, which is that in 1956 or 1954, there was a moderate liberal president of Guatemala took power, Jacobo Arbenz, and he had a very mild policy. He wasn't even a communist. He didn't, execute the bourgeois, and he didn't do state ownership of everything. He noted that the country, because it was one of those banana republics that had been created and largely propped up by America and American agriculture, specifically the United Fruit Company, that they had a control of vast swaths of the land of Guatemala, and most of the people who lived there were landless peasants. They had no access to land, no access to be able to feed themselves, really, because there wasn't really an industrial. They couldn't go to the cities and work in factories. There really weren't any. There was just this land, most of it owned by the United Fruit Company, which had giant tracts, much of it uncultivated. Like they weren't even using it. It was just maybe in the future they might need to use it or something.
Yeah.
And Arbenz ordered them to expropriate with compensation the untilled, unused land of United Fruit to distribute to some of these peasants who had no other way of sustenance. And as soon as that happened in Washington, John Foster Dulles, the Secretary of State, was like, this guy has to go. It has to happen. And then they did, within a few years, they had done Operation Ajax, which was a resounding success, and it required very little actual manpower or anything. They didn't even create an army the way that they did with the Bay of Pigs. They literally just hired some freelancers to drop bombs in the downtown, in the main city, sent out radio broadcasts saying, the rebels are here, and hired one of the guys in the Guatemalan military to basically be their point man, say, we'll back you as the president. And between those things, the government fled, and then it became a military dictatorship. Yeah.
It's crazy. Like you go to a supermarket and you look at the bananas and you're like, oh yeah, that's a good amount of bananas. But the big fruit companies, they pick so many bananas. So they have to do this. They have to murder people, murder union organizers, because there's a lot of bananas out there.
There's so many fucking bananas.
Yeah. Yeah. But I just feel like as a regular person, you don't really think about this stuff because you don't see where you're not a shareholder in any of these big companies, or you don't even understand like the sheer size of them.
Yeah.
No. Well, United Fruit was essentially a monopoly in terms of bananas in the United States market, and they controlled the domestic policies of every country in Latin America. They invented the concept of a banana republic.
Right. Okay. Didn't Chiquita Banana like hire a right-wing terrorist organization to like kill union organizers?
Oh yeah,
at some
yeah.
point?
They've done that to this day, as has Coca-Cola, famously in Colombia.
Right.
There's been a number of there are a lot of the drug dealers. Drug dealing is sort of ideological in Colombia in a lot of ways, because you've got like FARC dealt drugs. A lot of those the Maoist insurgencies dealt drugs, and also the paramilitary organizations that the right wing ones that grew up to fight FARC also sold drugs, like the AUC. And so these guys would go into villages and pacify communist areas with chainsaws and stuff. And while they were doing that, they would also take contracts from local factory owners to kill people who were organizing for unions. And a lot of them are subcontractors for Coca-Cola. And Coca-Cola is on record giving money to these groups that ended up killing the people trying to organize in their factory. And Coca-Cola claims, well, this was a sort of a protection racket. They
Look,
basically,
folks, you ever run a business?
they basically forced us to do it.
Yeah.
Like those paramilitaries were basically like protection racket, and they were making us pay money, and we didn't know what it went for.
Oh, okay.
But that's their argument anyway. But I mean, the bare fact of them paying these groups that then killed people who were organizing in their factories is a fact, as is the fact that this isn't Central America or United Fruit, but just the same sort of collusion between Latin American dictatorships and American corporations, is that after the military coup in Argentina in the 70s, when there was the Dirty War, which was thousands and thousands of leftists being grabbed off the street, tortured, many of them disappeared, there was a torture and detention center on the grounds of a Ford factory in Argentina.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
Jeez.
So they could literally take people off of the factory line and across the compound to torture and find out more information.
Jeez. Well, a wise man once said, I kill a communist for fun, but for a green card, I'm going to carve him up real nice.
By the way, I fucked up. Ajax was another thing we did in the 50s. I always confuse these two. Operation Ajax was
It's like
Iran.
another cleaning supply, I hope.
Now, Operation Ajax was very similar coup in Iran that we did in the same time period. PB Success was the Guatemalan. I'm sorry. Got that
It's just
wrong.
crazy because these places are like so far away. Like a flight to Iran, it's like 17 hours.
No, it's very far away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just worry about your own life, you know?
Well, that was actually a favor to the British, the Iranian one, because before the World War II, there had been a big corrupt collusion between the British oil company and the Shah, and they had oil concessions with very little remuneration to the country because they were kicking it up to the Shah. And then when they got a democratic government after World War II, and then you had the Prime Minister Mossadegh, he wanted to nationalize the British oil holdings. And the British, who were, at that point pretty broken up after World War II, they didn't have the imperial projection power that they used to. They literally asked a favor. They were like, hey, can you guys do something about this fucking asshole? Because if he's coming for our stuff, eventually he's going to come for your stuff, and he's going to be a communist. And they're like, yep, you're right, definitely going to be a communist. And that was basically how all of these companies sold these interventions. Was these regimes, they might not look like communists, but the fact that they're redistributing land or taking oil, that means that they definitely are going to be communists. And there's very little evidence for any connection before these events between like Arbenz or Allende in Chile or Arbenz in Guatemala or in Iran. There's no real sense that the Soviets were looking for that. They were really focusing on consolidating Eastern Europe at that point. But, it was really the only word you needed to say to make it happen. And that's what happened in Cuba is basically we saw he was redistributing land and doing communist sounding stuff, and then we basically drove him into the arms of the Soviets by deciding that we were going to take him out.
Right. I was talking to my grandmother
Can we
today.
pause real fast?
Yeah.
All right.
Sir, according to the police department's probable cause affidavit, one witness described your penis as oval-shaped and claimed when erect it was thick towards the bottom but was thin and small towards the head portion, and called it egg-shaped. Those are not my words, I apologize. But as Mr. Critton has stated, that this is a...
What the hell? Come on. That's not argumentative.
Yeah. Answer the question.
Yeah, that's not an argument. It's a yes or no question. It's not, He's not trying to get you into like a big debate. He just wants to know if
What are you
dick is
hiding?
egg-shaped.
Yeah. People are saying.
Yeah, many people have commented on your egg-shaped penis. Would like a yes or no answer.
It's in the logs.
It's on the record. Someone swore under oath that his dick was egg-shaped, and why would you lie? Why would you risk perjury charges? It's not like that helps your case any, you know? It's not like it's not like he would do more time if he did have an egg-shaped penis.
Last I checked, Your Honor.
It's not illegal.
It's
Not against the law to have an egg-shaped penis, Your Honor.
Not a crime.
Oh, yeah. Why did they stop the interview? It's like easy questions.
Yeah.
Because
It's like, oh, this is the question? This is easy. Yes.
when you're a billionaire, you don't have to be humiliated.
Yeah. Everything gets to be good for you all the time.
Yeah.
It's pretty great.
Yeah.
So strategy is like asking about his penis and then getting into the mob related questions to like trip him up.
Yeah. Are we good to go?
Rolling.
Okay,
right.
cool. I was on Reddit the other day, and somebody was like, "Yeah, it's really funny watching a dumb guinea like Mike Recine try to understand socialism." And they go, "Hey, I'm seizing the means of production over here."
It's inspiring, though. If it can happen for you, Mike, it can happen for anybody.
Thank you. Yeah. See, everybody.
Yeah.
I don't even like Thanksgiving. My whole family. Fuck you. Dad, where's the Robert De Niro photo I gave you? He's like, I destroyed it. But I guess, I mean, was that sort of like the essential reason that they wanted Castro out of Cuba? Just people were losing too much money?
Well, that is a big part of it, yeah. And I mean, specifically, that provided all the motive that the mob needed because he shut down all the Lansky casinos and all that down there.
Yeah.
So
let's talk a little bit about JFK's relationship with Giancana, because allegedly Joe Kennedy met with Giancana in Chicago, and he was like, "If you help my son win this election, like, you know, things will be good for you." And then so Giancana, and at this point he already has his big empire, so he sends his guys to go and recruit people. And actually, there was an interview with Frank Collada, who was an associate of Anthony Spilatro, the guy from who Joe Pesci played in Casino. But Frank Collada's like, yeah, we went to the neighborhoods, we recruited Polacks and Irish and Italians. And actually, JFK won Illinois by like 9,000 votes.
he won Illinois by a very suspicious amount. He came in by the skin of his teeth.
Okay.
That is one of those things that's one of those many things that seems like an urban legend, but it's true, that there's highly likely that there was illegal voting and shenanigans in Illinois in 1960. But people often wonder, well, why didn't the Republicans do anything about it? And it's because there's also likely that the Republicans in downstate Illinois were also doing it. They just didn't do it enough. They didn't steal enough votes. And so no one could open that jar without spilling out everything.
Right.
But yeah, the accusation is that Giancana helped with Illinois during the general, and also that Teamsters connected to Giancana helped him win the West Virginia primary over Hubert Humphrey, because he was you didn't
help JFK?
Help JFK. Because in 1960 they had not yet established the full system where every state has a primary or a caucus or something. Okay. There were only a few states that did them, and they were just basically for show. The real votes happened with the party bosses at the conventions, but they had a big effect on the media because there were only a few of them. And the big tests for the ones that did have the states that did have primaries that were the big tests for Kennedy were the ones that were dominant Protestant, because everyone was worried, will he play outside of the Catholic Northeast or whatever. And it was Wisconsin and West Virginia, and he was going against Hubert Humphrey, the Minnesota senator, who became LBJ's vice president after Kennedy's assassination. And he won Wisconsin against the guy from right next door, and then West Virginia, which is almost entirely Protestant, that was close too. But there was some. The claim is that there was some organized labor help that came courtesy more of because the Humphrey was a huge union guy. It was more of a favor to the friends of the friends.
Right.
So there is this idea that Kennedy came into office sort of owing them.
Okay. Right.
But not necessarily. That's the question. Not necessarily with his knowledge, because it's like if his dad did it,
right. Why would he put his brother in that special?
That's the thing. Him making his brother. That is spit in my face. That is dishonor, because they didn't hate anybody more than they hated Bobby Kennedy, obviously.
Right.
And he made him attorney general, and then he He fucking he deported Carlo Marcello.
Yeah.
What the fuck?
No loyalty.
No
These
loyalty.
fucking nicks.
These fucking sheenies.
Yeah, you can't trust them. What did they do exactly? I mean, I guess they had union control and stuff like that, so they were just able to get the word out.
You just get guys out. They're the foots. Like when we had unions, what they would do for candidates, they would provide the bodies, like for a rally, for door knocking.
Okay.
Maybe cracking a head. Who knows?
Yeah.
In the rougher and tumble or more tumble situations, but basically just muscle for anything you might need.
Yeah.
I got to play a Union thug for a Chapo sketch, and that was a lot of fun.
It was excellent. Got a lot of laughs. Thank you again for that.
I was thinking though, I should have gave you guys like an Eastern European take.
That would have been good too.
Like
Yeah.
A little variety.
Yeah. Anyway, that's always. So anyway, according to Politico, the CIA scheme to kill Castro was hatched in September 1960. This is Joseph Roselli and Sam Giancana. They were approached by Robert Mayhew, a glib middleman for the CIA.
IBM, Iron Bob Mayhew. We'll talk more about him later. He's very interesting.
Okay. The agency referred to him as a cutout, a buffer who shielded the CIA and the White House from any messy consequences of their actions. Mayhew also simultaneously worked for a handsome salary as a private fixer for multimillionaire Howard Hughes.
Yep.
When Mayhew offered the CIA's $150,000 fee for Castro, the two gangsters declined, said they would do it for free. Because you know what? I love this country.
I believe in friggin' free market capitalism over here.
Yeah. One dead banana head coming up. Yeah, so it's like, it's also really funny, like the way they were putting this scheme together. Like Roselli would apparently be in the Friars Club, like talking about it on their phone. Like Frank Sinatra sponsored his membership, but he would just be there, like, talking about killing Castro.
Yeah, we're gonna friggin' kill Castro. Hey.
There were many failed attempts to kill Castro. There were some guy got cold feet when they went to poison Castro. There were also a lot of guys sympathetic to Castro in Florida who undermined their efforts. And then after the disastrous U.S.-backed Bay of Pigs invasion of Cuba in 1961, the CIA began Phase 2 of its unsuccessful Castro assassination mission, which continued throughout 1962 and into early 1963.
Operation Mongoose.
Yeah.
That's the one, man.
Now, apparently,
badass name.
RFK said to Giancana and Roselli, he goes, "Why can't you gentlemen get things cooking the way 007 does?"
Genius.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Just the smartest people on earth.
Yeah, right. Everybody's just an idiot.
Yeah, it's like, why aren't you more like 007? It's like he's looking up from a plate of spaghetti. He's got a bunch of pasta signs on his shirt. It's like 007 does not get like some gravy and macaron and get loggy and fall asleep.
Yeah. Roselli was an interesting guy too. They called him Handsome Joe, and he just loved, like, he would go out to Hollywood, try to extort people out there. That's what's funny to me is a lot of these gangsters went out to Hollywood.
Oh, yeah.
And they would just like pal around with these actors, and they'd be like, Bugsy Siegel did this. He was like, "Hey, let me borrow like 40 grand," and then just like never pay it back because he knew they wouldn't, ask for it.
Yeah, it ruled. Yeah, they'd be terrified of you.
Yeah. That's what I like about the mob. It's an underdog story. We got to extort the
well, George Raft, that's his name. I was thinking of the guy who was Bugsy's best friend and he was like he had been like a low-level mob guy.
Yeah.
And he had gone and become a movie star. George Raft. And then Bugsy shows up and he's like, "Dude, chill out. Stop screaming at Virginia Hill at Sardi's, please."
It also said this: the plan almost got derailed because Giancana had a girlfriend, Phyllis McGuire.
Ooh, this is good.
The McGuire sisters, yes.
Yeah, so he was dating her, but the CIA bugged the hotel room of a comedian who was like a sort of a love competition. I think she was dating this comedian. His name was
Dan Rowan.
Yeah,
Dan Rowan from Rowan and Martin. Yes, from Rowan and Martin Laughing. If anyone remembers that show, Sock It To Me. It was like a 60s sketch comedy show. Goldie Hawn was on it, and it was Rowan and Martin's Laughing. There was Dick Rowan and I forgot the other guy.
What kind of comedy are they doing back then? Is that blackface time or?
It wasn't, but it wasn't very good. It was literally they would look at the camera and say, "Sock it to me."
Oh,
that was the thing.
Yeah.
If you watch it, it's astoundingly unfunny.
Okay.
It's like when your grandparents are like, "Come here, let me show you some real comedy."
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's that kind of stuff. But that's so funny. Like that's funny the way these friendships like develop, you know. And you just have this guy who's like, "Yeah, this guy's dating my girl," and the CIA is like, "We're on it.
We'll get a look at it."
Yeah.
Well, you know who else Giancana was dating around this time, right? Judith Campbell Exner. You know who that is? Judith Campbell Exner was dating simultaneously during this period, or at least fucking
She
dating.
an actress?
She was an actress. She was a call girl. She was
Okay.
She was all over the place.
As
She
you had
was-
to be back in the
She
day.
had sex. She was having sex at the same time, not at the exact same time, but in the same era with Giancana and JFK.
Really?
Yes.
Hell yeah.
And there is question about to what role she played as a conduit of information between the two. Nobody knows. There's no record or anything, but she was fucking both of them. She was fucking Giancana and Kennedy at the same time.
Giancana found out. He was like, "I'm not going to stand for this."
As of course did Marilyn Monroe.
Yeah. Interesting. Wait, she fucked Giancana?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
There's a horrible story about her going to right before she died, going to some, I think in like Lake Tahoe, some rented house of Giancana and Sinatra, and they just got her fucking blasted on like alcohol and like barbiturates and stuff,
Yeah.
and just like did whatever they wanted with her like unconscious body, and they took pictures.
Jesus.
Yeah, Sinatra was a huge piece of shit. He was a real scumbag.
All
That's a
right.
guy that wouldn't have lasted.
All right, Matt, we're
during
here to talk
social
about the
media.
mafia, okay? All right, let's just fake. Yeah, really.
That guy would have been Me Too pretty quickly.
Oh God, yeah.
It's so funny. Do you remember back in the day, like hearing about an artist, like a musician that you liked, and someone was like, "Yeah, that guy beat his wife," and it was almost like accepted that great singers
Yeah.
just beat their wives.
No. The degree to which shit is, I mean, like Sean Penn blows my mind. Sean Penn, he wrote a book where he got to complain in terrible prose about Me Too and like the pusillanimous Philistines who seek to destroy a strong man.
That's great.
Madonna, according to Madonna, when they were married, one time he tied her to a chair
Oh yeah,
and beat her.
yeah.
God.
And that's just because it happened in like the late 80s. It's like, well, there's a statute of limitations. We don't talk about that anymore. It's kind of amazing.
Yeah.
I'd hate to be the editor of that book. Oof. Oh,
yeah.
the stream of consciousness.
Makes you feel bad for Matt Lauer because he's like, why is Sean Penn still working?
It's true.
Come on. I hired a contractor. Yeah, interesting. It's also like an interesting because Hollywood always has an interesting relationship with the mafia where they're always like palling around with them. You know?
yeah.
They're palling around with these people who commit murders. But it's probably like exciting for them.
Oh no,
They're
it's
like,
cool,
"Oh,"
and they get to feel
to-
like they get to pretend maybe it's research or something. I'm getting close. If I ever play a guy, I can
Right.
get it close to these dudes.
right.
God, I wonder how many poor coke dealers in history have had an actor that they were giving coke to like buttonhole them and like ask them every element of their life because they're playing a drug dealer in a movie or something.
Oh yeah.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Because usually it's the other way around.
Yeah,
like you don't
right.
want to have to hang around while your drug dealer like plays video games or something.
Yeah.
But how many guys are like, I should go? And like Topher Grace is like, wait, no. I'm in this movie Traffic and I play a guy on coke. So what do the people like around coke?
That's funny. Yeah. Mr. Grace, I got 2 kids at home, you know? I got more deliveries to make. Yeah. So basically what happened was let's see. Okay, so the Bay of Pigs happens. That gets all fucked up.
That was a bungle. Stone bungle.
Yeah.
And it's a classic example of just where it's so many presidents are this way. It's you've got a policy that's given to you, and the best thing to do, honestly, would be to not go through with it. But instead you're thinking, well, I can like try to do it on the cheap. I can do it halfway measure.
Yeah.
Because the way that the thing was planned, the Bay of Pigs was planned. They were going to train these guys in Guatemala, secretly let them in on this beach, And then the thing that was going to make it work is they were going to get U.S. military air cover.
Yeah.
Yes, they were going to bomb the airstrips. They were going to bomb the defensive areas so that they could actually break through the bridgehead. And that was built into the CIA's plan. They didn't think it would work without it, but they had the plan when Kennedy came in, and Kennedy was cool on it. He was not really down. He wasn't saying no, but he also wasn't too enthused about it. And they didn't want to tell him about it because they didn't want to say it's either all or nothing. You have to commit right now before we do this to use basically tip America's hand from a covert operation to an overt operation and just say we're going to bomb these guys. And he wouldn't do it. Or they didn't think he would do it, so they didn't tell him. And so they kept going. They would tell him, no, we're going to do it with an insertion, and they're going to be able to do it. They assured him. Richard Bissell and those guys, they assured Kennedy, you just let us do this landing, and it'll work. And what they were all assuming is that, well, all right, we'll do it and we'll land it, and when it doesn't work, we'll tell him it can only work if he uses air support, and then because he's already pot committed, he's already sunk enough costs into this thing.
Interesting.
He will sign off on it.
Wow.
That was built into the plan.
Yeah.
And then they did it.
So these war generals are trying to force Kennedy into this.
Yes.
Sounds sexual almost.
And then Kennedy wouldn't sign off on the air support.
When it happened, because he was like, I'll do it on the cheap, I'll do it with minimal exposure, but I'm not going to do the whole thing. And honestly, he probably should have either signed off on it when they asked him for it or not done it in the first place. He should have killed it. But that's the thing. The presidents are, especially on national security stuff, are so terrified of appearing, especially early in their terms, weak or not aggressive.
Sure.
It's like Obama got in there and he had pledged to end the war in Afghanistan. And he got in, and the first thing that generals did is say, we need 50,000 more troops in Afghanistan. Not even we can stay with what we have. We need 50,000 more, 40,000 more.
They don't need it, right?
Yeah. And Obama, who came in with the conclusion that most people had drawn, which is that it was an unwinnable war and we should draw down from it. He's like, well, now the generals want 40,000 troops. And they know that if they don't give them any, they're going to get shit behind. They're going to backstab them. They're going to complain to the press that they're not willing to win. They're going to lose them. And so I said, how about 20? And they said they needed 40.
Yeah.
20 is not going to do anything other than make it look like you're doing something.
Yeah.
And so that's the same thing with Kennedy. Well, I don't want to do the air support. So what if we give him give him this invasion and then we just hope it works?
It's weird.
Meanwhile, the guys actually coordinating it knew it wouldn't work without the air support.
Right. It's
they just figured he'd be pot committed at that point. And then when he didn't do it, it blew the whole thing up. And that's why all those Alpha 88 guys hate Kennedy forever, because he betrayed them, because he didn't give them the fucking air support that they'd been promised. And they had been promised it, but nobody had told him.
Right.
Wow.
It's weird to hear war generals and presidents haggling over lives. And bombs.
No, that's the whole job, really. It's like, if you don't want to do that, honestly, you shouldn't get the job. You're doing it because you like it.
gold watch. You're like, how about $250?
Yeah. So after the Bay of Pigs, they kind of gave up on trying to kill Castro. Right?
The assassination, but they continued trying to undermine his regime. Like Operation Mongoose was the operation that Bobby Kennedy actually oversaw from a huge CIA campus in Miami at the University of Miami. And it was a destabilization effort, a ZR rifle, where they were sending covert boats to Cuba at night to do things like poison reservoirs, kill troops on patrol, burn sugarcane. That was a big one. They wanted to undermine the economy. So they would try to destroy their agricultural output. And that was a pretty constant for the rest of Kennedy's. I think Johnson stopped it when he got in. But the rest of Kennedy's term, it was this constant flow of operatives sneaking into Cuba from Miami to try to destabilize their economy.
Yeesh.
You know what else is funny? The JFK files also suggest that Giancana launched his own anti-Castro operation without any support from the CIA.
Hell yeah, renegade.
So what he does is he finds a Chicago guy named Richard Kane, who was a defrocked cop who spoke Spanish. And Kane claimed to have smuggled himself into Cuba in another failed bid to murder Castro. And like a good double agent, Kane also volunteered with the CIA to spy on Cuban exiles living in Chicago.
That's so
like,
awesome.
I'll do this for my country.
I
saw this Cuban family.
I honestly never I get why they asked the mob, because the mob knows how to kill people and they had a real motive to want to get rid of Castro. So I get that. And CIA ops are all about finding credible, deniable partners. Like whenever you talk about any of these CIA operations, the people doing them on the ground are never CIA operatives. Many of them aren't even Americans. They are people who can be plausibly denied to be connected to the agencies. The mob is actually perfect. But I never got how they thought it was going to work. Like a couple of guys are going to come out of like they're going to come off a cruise ship in like suits with like a silk shirt with the fucking collar open. And they're like, hey, where can I get the good pasta fajoule?
Yeah, it's like that.
Well, you got no good pizza here in friggin' Havana? You call this pizza? Forget about it. And what? They're gonna take a Tommy gun out of a violin case and spray the presidential palace. I never and they didn't either, because none of it ever really went anywhere.
They're like, that's Vinny the Wrench over there. He's a genius.
It's like, I know how to walk up on a guy while he's like eating dinner and shoot him in the head. I don't know how to kill a president of a country. And that and
just blending in general.
You're like a foot
I know how to kill a
than
guy at his daughter's communion.
I know how to look. I'll tell you this: if I could be Castro's friend, and we hang out, and he comes to my house, and then one day I get a call to say you got to kill him, and then while he's sitting in an easy chair, I strangle him with piano wire. I could do that. But anything more than that, too complicated.
That character of like the secret operative with a bunch of like Liam Neeson and Taken, that probably doesn't exist anywhere, right?
I mean, we've got just operators. Like we've got just the fucking Delta Force guys, just these jocks running around with their big beards doing assassinations and stuff. There's not really like the spy shit, like the suave guy who tries to blend in. It's all these thick-necked hot dog psychos in like 50 pounds of tactical gear just kicking in your door.
Right. Yeah. And they're all like going to bars and they're using like the mystery method to pick up women.
Yes, they are doing that. They're absolutely doing that.
They don't even fuck.
Yeah, they're stationed in St. Louis.
I thought I could. Yeah. I thought spies get laid. I told this girl she got weird shoes.
Oh yeah.
So like the CIA is interesting because I guess you just think of it as like this powerful covert group of spies that's like elusive, but they came under fire. They sort of got caught, right, for the scheme.
Oh yeah. In the 70s, this whole thing blew up. It was a number of investigations by Congress. The Tower Commission was a big one. The Church Commission too, and they found out all this stuff. They found out about the connections to trying to assassinate Castro, the connections to the
JFK. Did JFK approve the plot to kill Castro?
Yeah, I think he was down on all the stuff again. They actually were kind of obsessed. The Kennedys, both of them, John and Bobby, were kind of obsessed with Cuba, especially after everyone nearly died during the Bay of Pigs invasion.
Right.
And they really did have that sort of Cold Warrior phobia about this communist island 90 miles away. We got to do something about it.
But I imagine Bobby wouldn't want to work with them, right?
I mean, he did. I guess it was just like, you do what you got to do. You work with who you have to work with.
You can only control so much.
Exactly. And the higher good is protecting America's interests, and that necessitates dealing with bad people. I mean, how many dictatorships and horrible governments were we dealing with at the time as well?
Right.
It's not a thing that you can get squeamish about if you want to really fight a Cold War.
Right. So Roselli actually, at some point, he gets in trouble with the FBI, who discovered he was doing a card-playing scheme that he ran at the Friars Club. He cheated fellow members by planning a spy peeking through a hole in the ceiling. It's like it's so funny. Like you're
so
here,
high tech.
But it's like you're here, you made it, you arrived, you're at the Friars Club. Sinatra sponsors you, and you're still stealing from people. That's like me going to like an SNL after party and being like,
just pickpocketing.
just stealing Lorne Michaels' wallet or something.
I got Colin Jost's watch.
Yeah. So Roselli gets in trouble, and then Hoover's guys discovered that he was an illegal Italian immigrant. And Roselli
Mamma
wasn't his
mia.
real name. But then Roselli was like, "Fuck you! I'm gonna blow the lid off this whole Castro thing." He says that to the CIA.
It doesn't sound good, like.
No. Yeah. So then Roselli was called to testify before a Senate committee, and then Giancana offered Roselli money even if his legal bills became overwhelming. So, these guys they stayed friends through all this.
And then someone put him in an oil drum and threw him in the ocean.
Mm-hmm. Well, before
presumably the Trafficante, right? The Spanish-speaking mafia boss.
Well, also, right before he testified, Giancana was shot to death in his house.
Mm-hmm.
So you had these guys, they're getting in trouble, and I think they did, I don't know, it was probably risky to have them around.
Oh, yeah.
Do you think maybe the CIA might have killed?
That figures into a lot of JFK assassination stuff, that they were part of the JFK assassination, and as a result, they were loose ends who had to be tied. But honestly, even if they had not, even if their involvement had just been Cuba, that's enough to warrant trimming some loose ends for sure.
Yeah, I've got 4 theories on his death, according to Wikipedia.
On Giancana?
Yeah. The first one is what's his name? Turned on him, Spilatro. Tony Spilatro. Second one is
because he was trying to acquire more power.
Yeah, he was trying to climb the ladder to be seen, visible. You got Nicholas Cabrisi told the FBI during the 2000s that he knew Tony Carardo was part of it. So that's Giancana's daughter considered him to be the killer.
Okay.
And then Trafficante, and then the CIA. Those are the 4 theories.
Right. I think also, there was a point where Roselli was kind of grasping at straws, and he was like, I'll tell everybody about what we did to JFK. But I don't know if there was any legitimacy to that.
And Giancana was dead at that point, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah. Do you think? Because I didn't really delve that deeply into the mob's involvement with the JFK assassination.
Oh yeah, no, I had a whole. I have.
Okay. Okay.
I had a whole JFK phase.
Okay.
When I was a cool younger person.
Right.
I honestly have gone back and forth on JFK. At this point, I'm essentially an agnostic on it.
Okay.
I don't really. I think that there's too much distance, too much evidence is destroyed. There's no way of knowing. If I had to put a gun in my head, I'd say it was. If you put a Manlisher Carcano behind a grassy knoll at my head, I'd say it was probably Oswald alone.
Okay.
But I would not be terribly surprised if it was somebody else.
Wasn't there
and if it was, the mob as trigger man is one of the most coherent. It's considering Jack Ruby and his connections to the
Jack
mafia.
Ruby worked directly for Giancana.
Directly for Giancana, and there are these phone logs of the conversations he was having with Chicago, and they spike after the Kennedy assassination.
Yeah.
And in that 24-hour period, he's talking to Chicago all day, basically, until the moment he walks up and he plugs Oswald.
Yeah.
And because he was just a straight mob guy.
Okay.
And
he was dying of cancer anyway, too, right?
Well, he had cancer when he was in prison. Nobody knows how he got it. There's actually a conspiracy theory that they gave him cancer in prison by leaving him during a doctor's appointment, by leaving him in the room with an x-ray machine turned on.
Wow.
And they just fried his DNA or something and gave him cancer. He did say something very odd to the Warren Commission. When the Warren Commission went to his prison to interview him, he said, I have information. I need to get to Washington, though. I cannot say anything here. I cannot be truthful here. And they basically said,
now where was he at this point? Dallas?
He was in the Texas prison. And they said, well, that's very nice. And they never got back to him. And then he died of cancer shortly after that. It's I mean, his involvement is so odd. It's very difficult to credit his explanation that he wanted to spare Jackie the pain of a funeral. This guy who's essentially an adjunct of the Chicago outfit and has this horribly seedy strip club that is, by the way, was a frequented watering hole for Dallas police officers. The Dallas PD was that was kind of their hangout and he loved kissed cop ass all day long. This guy, and the Dallas PD is also an organization that is deeply implicated in any kind of serious JFK assassination theory. From J.D. Tippit, the guy who was shot maybe by Oswald, the cop who was shot by Oswald when he was on the loose, and the way they caught him in the theater. It's all very odd, but for me, for a while I had beliefs, and it's just the pieces are so scattered. I can't really. And the thing is, I don't have to. I'm just some guy. I don't have to believe anything. And I've just decided that like the Zen position is just to be like, this is a thing that I'm comfortable saying to myself. I don't know.
Yeah.
But man, if you get on it, there's at every point there's like a thing you can go off on that's just fascinating. There's so much weird shit involved with the JFK assassination, and so many people who died afterwards.
Yeah,
really.
Direct witnesses, people involved in some way or another.
Yeah.
It's one of those sort of eerie events. It's like, even if it wasn't a conspiracy, it's just an eerie event where reality doesn't really seem to cohere, where it feels like things aren't fitting, you know, because it's like, how are all these things connected? How is all this stuff happening? I don't know. It just feels like it's like a node, you know, it's like a historical node, and everything kind of spirals out from it.
Right.
In terms of what happened, I don't know.
Let me ask you this. What did the CIA have against Kennedy? Did they not like him?
Well, the theory hinges on the fact that after after the Bay of Pigs assassination, he became incredibly pissed at the CIA because they had literally lied to him about what was needed for the operation to work.
Yeah.
And this is actually documented. He did say, and he said this, I want to break it into 1,000 pieces. He wanted to dismantle the CIA.
Okay.
And at the same time, this is, I think, less substantiated, but there's also the theory that he was trying to draw us down out of Vietnam, and the military industrial complex and the Pentagon stuff needed us to stay in Vietnam, and they killed him over that. I think that's less persuasive, especially since the evidence that he was really leaving Vietnam is pretty shaky, especially considering that everybody in his cabinet essentially stayed over with Johnson and got him to expand the war dramatically. It basically requires you to think that Kennedy was like this one guy who could see through everything. And the thing is that he was not that fucking smart. He wasn't that good a president. Yeah, he's kind of a dumbass in a lot of ways.
It's like a rich kid, right?
Yeah, rich kid. You really do have to
well-spoken,
you have to really
handsome.
hero worship Kennedy to a really insane degree to get him to be the guy who was going to end the Cold War, which like Oliver Stone, for example, thinks. But more credible to me is he was just a real threat to this agency, which by that point had become incredibly influential and powerful in Washington, was sort of the backbone of the entire defense establishment or national security state, which came up after World War II and kind of took over government. And you had a figure like Allen Dulles, who had been CIA director and was fired by Kennedy, who had plenty of personal motivation to want to get rid of the guy for getting him out of his dream job.
Yeah.
And there's all these connections, other guys, and to people involved in the assassinations, like all these Cubans involved, and the fact that Oswald was part of this Fair Play for Cuba committee, which was operated out of the office of a private investigator who was connected to the FBI and CIA. It's very eyebrow raising, but as I said, I don't know. But if it did happen, if you had to like say, all right, you don't get to say it was Oswald, you have to construct a theory of conspiracy. I would definitely take the position that the triggermen, the guys who did it, probably came from the mob, if that's what happened. Because they make the most sense as an organization that has like the connections in terms of people who are competent to do something like that, and also the distance.
Motive.
Yeah, and they had their own motive,
Yeah.
like the Marcello extradition and the sort of the betrayal they felt from Kennedy cracking down on the mob after they helped him get elected.
Yeah.
And then that makes sense to me as sort of the people on the ground level who pulled the trigger. But once again, I don't know.
Yeah.
They were like, "How dare you?"
Now, to get back to the Kennedy assassination, I'm actually more convinced as a conspiracy. Not all the way, but my percentage, like I'd say I'm 50-50, maybe 60.
The Bobby Kennedy?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
I would say that I'm maybe like 65
That's an
Oswald.
interesting one. Yeah.
I'm 65 Oswald, 45 conspiracy, maybe 75-25, depending on the day. But I'm like 50-50 on fucking Bobby because so that guy you talked about, Bob Mayhew.
Yeah. He
was the cutout who talked to Giancana on behalf of the CIA to arrange. Yeah. And he also worked for Howard Hughes. So when Bobby Kennedy is assassinated in 1968, it happens in the kitchen of the Ambassador Hotel in LA right after the California primary. Sirhan, the young Palestinian ex-jockey, comes into the room, pulls a .22 pistol out, and just starts firing it. He's grabbed and pulled down. By all accounts, including photographic and video evidence, he's standing approximately 6 feet in front of Bobby Kennedy when he opens fire. There's this famous picture of Bobby Kennedy lying on the ground. His wife, Ethel, is cradling his head, and there's a clip-on tie next to him. That clip-on tie belonged to a private security guard who'd been hired for the event named Thane Caesar, who worked for Hughes Tool, which was at that point controlled or administered by Robert Mayhew. Mm-hmm. So he has a direct connection to this CIA and big money sort of major domo. And they do the autopsy on Bobby Kennedy, and the coroner says that the bullet that killed him was fired from directly behind his ear.
Mm-hmm. Right.
As in there was stippling, as in there was powder burns on the ear. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, everyone agrees that Sirhan was right in front of him. Mm-hmm. Thane Caesar, the guy whose tie got pulled off, Kennedy found out, was right behind him. Mm-hmm. And he also owned a .22 caliber pistol, which, he told investigators years later when they finally started asking questions about him, they asked him when he got rid of it, and he claimed that he got rid of it before the assassination, but they actually tracked it down to the guy he'd sold it to, and according to the handwritten receipt he'd given, he sold it a couple months after the assassination.
What a garage find, though. Yeah. The gun that killed Bobby Kennedy.
But
there's that clip on. Yeah, there's that clip on tie.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I've been listening to RFK tapes, and even the photographs didn't have the right number of bullets.
No, they've never been able to account for the bullets.
Isn't there audio too? There's audio of 13 shots being fired.
Yes.
And the gun.
Yes.
Insane.
Yeah. That one just on that one. Because there's more, I think there's a richer and more preserved, because JFK's brain literally disappeared. They put it in the National Archive and it's gone. I don't know if you guys knew that. But so there's no way to have any kind of record of the physical evidence. There's just there was just the incredibly botched and very, very rushed Parkland autopsy that was interrupted before the body was taken to Washington and done at the Naval Institute or whatever, and the brain's gone. But there's a richer physical evidence of Bobby Kennedy, and it does really seem very odd. And you have these direct connections between people in the room and these CIA and big money, operators, and any kind of motivation to kill. John Kennedy would have probably been even amplified by the idea of Bobby Kennedy getting to be president. Also, the FBI killed Martin Luther King. I think.
Yeah, I think we all know.
Yeah. Just all three people agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just common.
That just
knowledge.
makes sense. That just makes sense.
Yeah. Malcolm X too, right?
That's trickier. Maybe. Okay. Yeah. He was definitely killed by guys in the Nation of Islam, including maybe Louis Farrakhan. Mm-hmm. But I mean, the thing is,
that's
organizations.
Keith Ellison's boy, right?
Yeah, those organizations were so rife with police informers that who knows? Everybody who pulled the trigger on him might have been an FBI informant, and who knows who was actually giving the orders? I don't know.
Yeah,
right.
But he was killed by Nation of Islam guys.
Yeah.
But who was ordering them around? No one knows, because it was that. The FBI had people everywhere at that point.
Right.
Mm-hmm. It's weird to think we don't do that anymore. We don't kill activists or politicians. It doesn't seem like it's been a while since there's
I don't
been
know. Maybe we've just gotten better at it.
I think, that's certainly the QAnon thesis that they're all being murdered secretly. Yeah.
Oh.
I think, honestly, the 60s were dangerous, really. Mm-hmm. The 60s were a period where it felt like there might be a real legitimate challenge to structural power.
Right.
And a few assassinations and, Southern strategy here or there, Vietnam War.
Yeah.
They kind of took care of it. And really, we've sort of been in reaction ever since. And there really hasn't been anybody to threaten anything since then, So there's not even really a need. Although I'd say at the local level, they're still killing people. I'm incredibly suspicious of the deaths of the Ferguson activists.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if you guys know about this, but at least I believe 2 or 3 people who were involved in the protest movement in Ferguson after the Mike Brown shooting, including the guy in the archetypal photograph, the guy in the American flag shirt thrown back. Mm-hmm. Well, he's dead. Him and several others were killed, and the way they were, 2 of them at least were killed. They were found shot dead in burned out cars.
Right.
Wow.
And the thing is like, that's not, the police sort of said, and they were never solved. And of course, police are going to be like, well, gang violence or something. But like, that's not that's not a way. Gang violence isn't you burn someone in a car.
Yeah.
That's what you do when you know that burning something is the best way to get rid of physical evidence, because maybe you spend some time in the police academy or something. I don't know.
Right.
But I would not be at all surprised if you've got, because like these cops are unchained.
Yeah.
Like not even in the middle of the country, in cosmopolitan countries and cosmopolitan areas. There's these stories out of LA about like these neo-Nazi cells within like the LA Sheriff's Department. These guys who call themselves the Vikings, and they would do these jump out raids on suspected criminals where they would just open fire on them. I mean, they're essentially unchecked.
Yeah.
So the idea that some cops in like bumfuck Missouri decide to kill some people who are not going to probably be missed and who they're going to be investigating. Because for me, with conspiracies, the thing that I'm always doing is I'm just weighing the cost benefit to even take it seriously.
Sure.
That's why I've never credited 9/11 as a conspiracy, because it just never made sense as a risk reward thing. And of course, a lot of them will say, well, they weren't really risking anything. And my response to that is, if you think you can get away with something like that and you have no worry that you're going to get caught, then why would you need to do it in the first place? You have such total control over all situations that doing it is superfluous. But like a situation like that where you're local cops and you don't really have any sense that anything you do will ever be brought against you, and you can kill somebody in broad daylight anyway. How hard would it be to decide to just kill somebody and just burn them up and figure that the perfunctory nature of urban crime investigation will take care of the rest?
Why would they need those people gone, though, those Ferguson activists?
See, that's they wouldn't need them gone, but maybe they just want them gone.
Yeah, them gone. They don't like them. Yeah.
Well, they literally disrespected them. Like, and that's a thing whenever you read about urban policing, especially
because it's not always the most brilliant people doing assassinations.
No,
like,
well, it's a bunch of scared white guys from suburbs who genuinely feel threatened. They feel like they're going into war zones. They feel like they're going places where they have to at every moment be completely aggressive, and they have to be respected at every fucking second. They have to have you have to avert your eyes, you have to say sir to them. That's why there's all these videos of them losing their shit when they're slightly disrespected. Because that's terror to them, because it means their status is lowered and they might be touchable. And so you've got guys who are on TV throwing fucking tear gas canisters back at them, and it's like, we can't allow that. We can't let that go.
It's crazy.
The
funniust thing now is seeing those videos of like kids in the Bronx just talking shit to the cops, and the cops can't do anything. Get out, you bitch ass fucking, you look like a thumb.
It is funny that the video camera is their natural enemy.
A couple more things. There was with 9/11, there are a couple guys that were involved in that who died. There was a maintenance guy named Kenny Johanneman who, like, he was on the news being like, I pulled a guy out of the basement and his skin had been burned, and the towers are still standing in the background. So that's a little weird. And that guy Barry Jennings, who was the emergency manager for Building 7. Like had a heart attack or something.
Building 7.
But I feel like people should probably, I don't know, do you worry about Ocasio-Cortez? You think anyone's going to try to, you think we should be standing around her?
At this point, honestly, no, because I feel like it's nascent enough that there really isn't that sense of it being worth it to do something that drastic, to sort of do something that high profile. But I mean, honestly, it is a situation where if they start shooting people, it means that they're actually scared. But I don't think we're there yet.
Yeah, they're gonna sling dirt. You know, she didn't share her tips.
She didn't share her tips at one time.
Fucking day job. So that's how they're gonna bring it out.
Get the fuck out of here.
This is that guy Kenny Johanneman, though. I just want to. Okay, come on.
Yeah, we're coming up on time if you want to wrap up.
Now both the towers are still standing.
B1. What floor? The first one. What happened? Tell me. When a big explosion happened, some guy came out.
Are those seagulls still going too in the background?
Yeah, the fucking seagulls are still going.
I'm like, damn, 9/11 is happening and it's delightful.
At the beach. Yeah, wow. I need a Corona.
All right, here we go.
Find your beach. 9/11.
Yeah, you're watching the tower come down and want to get away.
Yeah, like a bottle comes into the sand next.
I just don't trust him to man the.
No, I understand.
I'm Joe Rogan and I'm Jamie.
Yeah, that's the way to be.
Yeah.
Jumping out of windows. I've seen at least 14 people jumping out of windows. It's horrific. I can't believe this is happening.
Anything else
But
that
yeah,
you saw? Were
big
you there
explosion.
For the second hit by the plane?
About 10 minutes later, the second building went off.
Anyway.
So
All right.
did
So
he die mysteriously? Is that what happened?
yeah, he like allegedly shot himself, and his suicide note looked like it was written by like a 4-year-old. It was like,
That
yeah.
is interesting.
So
I guess I
who the
wouldn't
hell
rule
knows?
anything out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, who knows?
So about Sam Giancana, I know like we're coming up on the end of the time here, but like the only thing we
you got
didn't
somewhere to be,
no, but
because you work for me. So.
it's been over an hour. It's been like an hour and 10 minutes.
Yeah.
You show respect.
Sorry. But the only thing we didn't touch about Sam Giancana was like towards the end, like he got so fed up with federal surveillance that he decided to sue the FBI. Do you remember that story? Did you read
I
about
never
that?
heard that. That's awesome.
Yeah, he all the old timers hated him because it was way too much heat.
Yeah, that's not. It's like, no, you don't do that.
Yeah.
You don't do that. You just knock on the window and you go, come on, we're going for a ride, like in Goodfellas.
Yeah, and it was all just bullshit. They were just catching him like at the golf course, and he was like tired of being harassed.
Mm-hmm.
So like that was another fun tidbit about Sam Giancana. It
that
actually
an
led to a
Italian-
pretty good soundbite too, with Bobby Kennedy being like, "Are you a little girl?"
Yeah, I thought only little girls giggled, Mr. Giancana.
And like I guess that enraged him.
Oh yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah.
I was thinking about this when Bill O'Reilly asked Donald Trump about Putin and how Putin's a killer,
Oh God, yeah.
and Trump said, "A lot of killers. You think our country's so innocent?"
Yes.
And
Amazing.
that,
Which camera am I talking
Yeah.
to?
but that made me think of that moment in the debate where he was like, when he was in South Carolina, he was like, "They lied about the weapons, and they knew they lied."
Yeah.
And like Jeb Bush is like, "Oh, it's
Oh,
preposterous."
that's absurd. I don't know what you're talking about.
yeah.
I love my mom.
I mean, yeah, watching him like destroy those guys was pretty.
That was the only good political fun that has existed, and we really should have savored it more. If we'd known how isolated it was going to be, we should have had more fun with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, because the thing is, he just talks all the time and his brain's dying. He'll occasionally accidentally say something true, and then people are like, hell yeah. Like, yeah, we are killers. Yes, we did lie about Iraq.
I asked my grandmother about Jeb Bush. She was like, "Oh, he's such a weenie. He's like, can my brother come? Can my mommy come?" She's like, "Get off the stage."
Accurate.
Yeah.
Owned.
Yeah. But it makes me think of that moment and that moment at the debates, and Trump does have like that sort of honesty to him, and it just makes me think about who the Dems are going to have to run to like sort of combat that. Like when he's like, "Oh, you and your fucking big ears," you know, like, do you have any thoughts about, like what's the best way to sort of, deal with that type of personality? Because it feels like he's gonna say stuff like that, and we'll have some establishment Dem who's like, this is an outrage.
Yeah. It was really frustrating because he is just he's just freestyling. His brain's dying. Half of it is gibberish. The other third of it is lies, and then there's a third of it that is actually true.
Yeah.
And because his whole thing was this indictment of the establishment parties. They haven't done anything for you, folks. They've been bad. The Republicans and the Democrats, and that is a true thing.
Yeah.
And so it resonated because the other people were saying, no, no, it hasn't. They've been good for you. And well, they know in their heart that's not true. So he comes off as more authentic, even though every other word out of his mouth is a lie.
Yeah.
And that is why, obviously Bernie would have won, but Bernie would have killed him in those debates because he wouldn't have had to, because Hillary had to take ownership for every disastrous decision of her husband's administration
And Obama.
and Obama's.
Yeah.
And she was there the whole time, so what could she say? But yes, and say, these are actually good. NAFTA is actually good.
Yeah.
Whereas Bernie would be like, I was against NAFTA. I thought that was a bad idea. I think that the Democratic Party lost its way a long time ago, and we need a new direction. And what would he have done? He just would have sputtered and probably called him a kike.
Yeah.
Which would have been great.
That would have been awesome.
There's got to be something there because you talk to even like the most like vehement Trump supporters and they're like, Hillary Clinton's the reason why I'm a Republican now. I used to be a Democrat. And then you bring up Bernie. And like I even brought up Bernie to my grandma grandmother, and she was like, "Well, at least he, you know where he stands."
Yeah,
She kind of did have like a respect for him.
Yeah,
that-
he campaigned too. She kind of holed up.
And the thing is, that's the reason that that's why Democrats, people who take that as like a thing in them, like that's an insane thing to me. But there are people who identify as Democrats who think it's part of their identity, and they're the people who hate Bernie the most in the world.
But he's not a Democrat.
Because he's not a Democrat, and he ran for that nomination, and he wasn't one. But also because he criticizes the Democratic Party. He says they sold out workers, they've been bad, they've been not giving us out. And they're like, how dare you say that about me because I'm a Democrat?
Right.
Not realizing that for everybody who isn't partisan brainwashed like that, Democratic Party is just a shitty brand that means losing jobs. And, it means racially coded stuff too. And those people are not reachable, but it means things to like a lot of casual voters that just means bad.
Yeah.
And anybody who's going to run against Trump is who feels the necessity of defending that is going to be on the back foot no matter what.
Right.
You have to have somebody who is able to burn those bridges and say, no, thank you.
Right.
And that's why, as much as I don't trust her at all, and I think that if she got in there, she would be Obama too. Kristen Gillibrand, when she, during the Me Too thing, during the Franken thing, turned on the Clintons because she replaced Hillary in that spot. They picked her. She was an upstate New York kind of conservative blue dog, and they picked her to take that spot. She was sort of a protege of the Clintons, and she just realized, they're dead end.
Yeah,
like they have no appeal to anyone, and so she condemned Bill and said he should have resigned after the Lewinsky thing.
Right.
And
she sells out a lot of people, huh?
Oh yeah, well that's the thing is she is a fucking shark, and she understands how the center of gravity is moved, and that's why she's moving left so quickly because she's like, I know what I have to do to appeal to these people. That's why I don't trust it. But in terms of beating Trump, somebody who has that instinct of just burning the bridges, not defending the old Democratic Party is certainly in the right. It will be easier for them because after 4 years of Trump being president, it will be harder for him to argue that because he's been in charge.
Right.
But I mean, if there's, who knows? If there's been if the fucking economy somehow has held together until 2020, he might just fucking win again.
Yeah.
Because like, hey, jobs are good. I mean, it's all going to collapse. There's going to be another 08 within the next 5 to 8 years, I think.
Yeah.
Or something similar, some big downturn.
Yeah.
But
so I gotta sell my Bitcoin.
He is such a buy gold. He is such a charmed oaf. He's just such a perfect golden dunce who's always failed upward. Yeah. He could just somehow magically miss it. Like he gets in there. It's like Grover Cleveland, and that second non-consecutive term is when the panic happened and people started to hate him. You could just like, all right, it's like Bush. Your last year, the economy is falling apart, and everyone realizes they hated you all along. But hey, you've been president for 8 years.
Yeah.
You win.
You did it.
Yeah.
Right. Is there any candidate who's not Bernie but like as progressive who could
not? I mean,
run, you think?
the problem is that Bernie was a fossil because Bernie was the guy who has been stuck in amber since the 70s, and every other politician, every Democratic politician, grew up in the post-liberal time, the neoliberal time when sort of the received wisdom was pro-business, pro-flexible labor markets, all this like this ideology that it's genuinely theological how deeply they believe it. Like they've been brought up in it. They honestly don't think there's any alternative to that type of politics.
Right.
And they're all everybody else who's going to run is going to be part of that generation. So I think it'll be bad unless Bernie wins, and he might.
Yeah. He's running again?
I think he is. Yes. And as long as he doesn't keel over, I think he might be able to sneak it out just because he is a brand that people understand, and he's somebody who people trust, and they're familiar with him, as opposed to, I'm guessing, somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 people are going to be running for this nomination. The rest of them are all going to be sort of fighting over the same piece of real estate, trying to define themselves to voters who don't really know who they are.
Right.
Whereas Bernie sort of has this area staked out.
Right.
So I think that is a big advantage for him going in and might get him the nomination.
Sure.
Because, like most people still don't know who Kristen Gillibrand is or Kamala Harris or Cory Booker or any of these.
DNC will be fair this time?
Well, they won't. I think they'll just be under more of they'll be under more of an eye. And also, the big thing they did was just the thing that gave it to Clinton more than any shenanigans is just clearing the deck and having no one else run.
Yeah.
That was huge. And one of the biggest pieces of political malpractice in the last 40 years.
Right. She was like Joe Biden.
Deeply. It
was like Martin
Obama sat
O'Malley.
him down. Obama sat him down and said, don't run, Joe. And of course, since Joe, like having a black friend has been Joe Biden's entire life dream, and being friends with Obama has been the greatest thing in his life. Of course, he listened to him. And now he's kicking himself. He's like, I could have won that, and you know, he might have been able to pull it out. And he certainly would have beat Trump. Yes, he certainly could have beat Trump. And so, of course, he's thinking, I could have gotten it, and he wants it back. And his positions are worse than Hillary's in many ways. But yeah, he got put aside. Everybody got cleared for her. They cleared the road for this person who anyone off the street could have told you is the most damaged, baggage-filled person. How the hell did the Obamas... It's like, wait a minute. One-term senator and a bunch of college kids beat her in 2008. How does she... Well, yeah, but this time it'll be different. This time with these obvious weaknesses...
There's no one else.
These obvious weaknesses that but that's the thing. It's like they didn't count on Bernie, but they figured it'll be okay. But why would the obvious weaknesses that allowed our campaign, our underdog campaign, to beat her in 2008 in the primary, not allow any Republican? They didn't even know Trump was going to be the guy. Any Republican allowed them to beat her. Right. These guys think what's so infuriating is these guys all think they're fucking geniuses. They all think they're so fucking smart. And that was one of the stupidest things. It's like everyone thinks, well, these guys, these jobs, it's tough. You got to know stuff. No, these guys don't know anything. Right. They're absolute charlatans. And anyone could have told you that Hillary was poisoned. And it was like, yeah, but has a lot of influence and she's got all this money. And, we don't want her. The big thing was they didn't want her complaining about them to the press outside the administration. They wanted her inside the tent pissing out. So they're like, we'll make her the Secretary of State. We'll assure her that she gets it next time. But that's vastly overestimating her ability to do anything. I mean, if you're president, you're going to have people pissing in your ear. And you should not accept for one less of those people a nominee that's going to try to solidify your legacy, who's basically incapable of winning, who's built to lose.
Well, Matt's got to go home in a little bit and get pegged by his girlfriend. But
boom.
All right. Since this is kind of still a mafia podcast, I guess, let's talk about this real quick. We'll wrap up and then we'll wrap up. Because I kind of feel like when you grow up Italian American in this country, you're either a John Gotti house, or a Giuliani house.
Makes sense.
And we're 100% a Giuliani house.
Nerds.
Boy.
Well, people are surprised when they meet my dad because he's so mild. He works in finance, you know. But I rebelled against that by driving trucks and fucking saying cunt and wearing tracksuits. But I guess the thing I want to ask you is because. My parents loved Giuliani, and then when 9/11 happened, they loved him. Even
of course, America's mayor.
He's still kind of like their guy. I don't even think they see
Time
him.
Person of the Year 2001.
Yep.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. He was kind of like that, golden boy for a little bit.
Yeah.
And now he's just a right wing lunatic. But he did prosecute the mafia. He went after crime. But do you think there's any merit to his legacy, or looking back on it, do you think it was just?
Dude, so I was watching this doc on him in the 9/11 response. He put the command center in the wrong spot because he wanted it to be within walking distance.
He put
to
it
9/11 to Ground Zero.
He put it in. He put the emergency response for the city in the World Trade Center itself,
right?
Which had already been a subject of a terror attack in 1993, and everyone told him, don't put it there. How is it going to respond to things? Because it's probably going to be the target. And he was like, nope. And it got blown up. And that's why he spent the day wandering around the city, because he wasn't in the command center because it had been blown up.
Yeah, it made great TV. But they found out that the place that they rented for the command center was a friend of his. Yeah. And they were fundraising on his yacht.
It was all crooked.
So
it was all kickback
basically,
shit.
the firefighter toll and the responder toll could have been half of what it was. Yeah. If he would have set up in the right spot.
Yeah, but then Pete Davidson wouldn't have a career.
Oh, God, no.
Oh, shit. If
I'm going back in time to 9/11, I'm not going to stop 9/11. but I'm going to keep Pete Davidson's dad from going to work, and I'm going to make sure that Seth MacFarlane gets on his plane. You know that, right?
Yeah. You don't think Pete's funny?
He's fine.
Yeah.
You don't think Seth's funny?
He's okay. I don't want them to die. It's just
Of
a joke.
course.
Yeah.
No. We're just trying to start shit.
No, Giuliani, garbage.
Yeah,
Right.
Shit. Same. I'm a
Just a
Gotti
piece
boy.
of shit.
Mhm.
Yeah, and a lot of people are like, "Oh, he cleaned up the city and there's no more crime." But I've talked to some friends, and one thing they've said is that like under Dinkins and Koch, like New York was a more affordable place to live. You didn't feel like you were being like squeezed. You could work a job and make a decent living.
No, he totally put like the developers in charge and just supercharged this hyper gentrification. And he didn't really have anything to do with the crime dropping.
No,
The crime dropped anyway. The crime dropped nationwide.
Didn't they have
And
like
the crime has kept dropping since he left office.
right.
Oh.
So it's like, where's the proof that he had anything to do with
I
it?
thought
Other
they
than he
had
just was
some
lucky.
Bloomberg though.
It started going
Bloomberg's
down under
policies.
Dinkins, actually.
Did it?
The real first, because the late 80s was the high point of crime in America in the 20th century. But in New York, at least, the crime, like the last year of Dinkins' term is when the crime started to trend downward. Like you look at the thing, it was under Dinkins. It was like, it's a Trump thing. He was just in the right place at the right time. And he got to take all the credit for it.
Because I feel like at my house we would sit down to dinner and be like, "Bless us, O Lord, and these thy gifts which you're about to receive." And Giuliani cleaned up the crime. My parents would make me recite it.
Amen.
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 Love it.
Yeah. Well, we had a great time.
Yeah. Thank you guys for having me on. It was great.
Do you have anything you want to?
Yeah,
you want to plug?
Virgil will kill me if I don't say this. Buy the book.
Yeah.
We've got a book coming out for Chapo Guide to Revolution, Manifesto Against Logic, Facts, and Reason. It's available for pre-order, and it's coming out in stores August 21st.
Very cool.
And thanks for listening, everybody. If you want to send Shelby a new strap-on to peg Matt with,
Oh, stop. I've got a 20-year-old
his
movie
address-
podcast.
his address is 3162 36th Street in Astoria.
Yeah, come on out.
So we're going to dox him. Yeah, check out the 20-Year-Old Movie Podcast. Also, guys, email us, sitdownpod@gmail.com. We're always happy to read your emails. Support us on Patreon, patreon.com/sitdownpod. Guys, we don't have any ads, okay? We have fake ads.
Yeah.
Blue Apron won't talk to us.
We're
But
trying to
the
get
only-
'em.
The only way we make money, I don't think we want ads on this show. I don't know. The only way we make money right now is through Patreon, so if you want to support us, support us for 1 month and then delete it. It's not that hard to
check
erase
it
your
out.
pledges. Do what I did with Save the Children, Be like, yeah, I'll subscribe, and then no, thank you.
need that money back.
Yeah. Oh God, I do have to cancel my Save the Children subscription, and I'm not looking forward to it.
Fun
Need a
phone
great
call to
excuse.
have.
Yeah. Anyway, guys, once again, thanks for listening. I'm Mike Recine, and bye-bye.
Bye.